put your hands together for the late morning program with your host, Namarasa.
Hey everybody, it's Namarasa, the late morning program with Namarasa, with my father-in-law, Kripamoya Das. Thanks for coming on, appreciate it.
Very happy to be here.
So you're from England, so he's, my father-in-law is visiting, and I thought to, have you on the podcast. You're a very interesting person. You have a lot of experience in different fields, things I like to talk about. Well, first of all, I want to show you my t-shirt. This is a t-shirt by Nityananda Chandra in Dallas. He made a t-shirt company. He's gonna probably post the link on the comments here, but go check them out. They're super nice, super soft, got some good designs, and so he sent me a shirt, and so I could put a little plug in for it. But anyways, yeah, Dad, tell me about let's talk about first your introduction to spirituality, to Krishna consciousness, maybe your upbringing. So you were born in Cornwall?
Yeah, if you look at the map of England, the long bit that sticks out like Florida,
Panhandle,
which is not quite Florida, that's called Cornwall.
Right.
So really, I grew up there. Okay. And I was always interested in exotic Eastern things. When I was 9, I told my mom I wanted to be a Buddhist monk when I grew up. So she reminded me when I was much older and shaven-headed and wearing orange robes. She said, "Well, you told me this is what you were going to do when you were very young." Mm-hmm. So I was interested in yoga, but in Cornwall we were sort of cut off from the metropolitan area, from the great big city of London, the melting pot of ideas. So I had to come to London in order to really discover people who believed in different ways. And I went to a series of music festivals because I thought music festival was not only for music, but it was for the exchange of ideas, and I met different people, and I bumped into the Krishna followers at that time.
Oh, wonderful. And how old were you at that time?
17.
17?
Yeah.
And is that, so you immediately were attracted and you immediately joined them?
I was very cynical. I was skeptical. Because I'd met many other people who told me that they had the truth and everybody else didn't. So when I met the Krishna followers, I said, "I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me you have the truth and everybody else is a schmuck." And they said, "No, actually, Krishna doesn't say that. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that every single soul is on the path towards him." So that really appealed to me. But I still retained my critical faculties, because in those days devotees were asking for a complete 100% buy-in and a change of lifestyle, haircut, clothing, leaving home, living communally. There was no alternative. So before I made that change in my life, I needed to be sure. So it took me a while.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say at that time we need 100% buy-in. What do you think that's different now from when you joined? Is it not 100%?
I think that we are more likely to allow someone a longer transition period.
Right.
I was allowed 2 weeks.
Wow.
Are you into this or not?
Wow.
If you're into it, you move into George Harrison's house and you live with us. And if you're not into it, then you can't live with us.
Right.
So now I think we're a little bit more understanding that there's a longer transition period where you may believe something, but you don't believe everything. I think most people are in that category.
Right.
And we understand that the ultimate nirvana, the ultimate achievement of spiritual perfection, is a goal rather than something that you intellectually decide on. And the belief system is vast and very complex. And so people are challenged in different ways. So it takes time.
Right. So when you joined, did you meet the founder, Srila Prabhupada?
Not immediately. I met his followers.
Okay.
Some of whom I liked. And some of whom I thought were mad.
Yeah.
And some of whom I thought were quite foolish. And the ones that I didn't particularly, that didn't appeal to me, and the ones that did, it was sort of a balanced bag. And so people said to me, just wait until Prabhupada comes. And then if he can't convince you, then none of us can, because we're all his followers.
Right.
So I waited until he came. And then by that time I was already well on the way to being convinced.
Wow.
But what appealed to me was the fact that I'm going to meet the founder, the person who wrote all this stuff, the person who wrote the books, the person who impressed George Harrison to give him his house.
Yeah.
The person who's who's the perfection of this path. So if I meet him and I'm impressed, then I'm in. And if I don't meet him, if I meet him and I'm not impressed, then I shall know one way or the other.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. How many times did you meet him?
About seven or eight.
Wow.
Different occasions.
Could you give like one or a few anecdotes, maybe, like some kind of what we were talking about earlier?
Well,
maybe tell that story. That's a great story. But was that with you again? No, that wasn't. Okay, maybe one with you first.
I mean, I suppose the first meeting was. I had to be. I was already of the mindset that I wouldn't. If a person is a genuine spiritual teacher, I wouldn't be able to understand everything completely.
Right.
He may do things that I find, just difficult to understand.
Yeah.
So I, on the very first meeting, someone asked him a question. Someone asked Prabhupada a question. And this is interesting because when I first saw Prabhupada, I got quite emotional. Because here's a person who, by his teaching, I've been getting up at 3 o'clock every morning.
Right.
And I've been regulating my diet according to these people's codes of behavior. Yeah. I've been reading the books. I see his image everywhere. People are talking about him everywhere. Every philosophical point they make is a Prabhupada said. And so here he is. He's just walked in the room. So I bowed my head, and immediately I burst into tears. It was an emotional reaction. I'm seeing him. He's here.
Right.
But then when it went to his first speaking, there were two people who asked him questions, and he didn't seem to answer the question. He answered it obliquely. And I was a little disappointed because I thought, well, these people have been waiting for you for a whole year, and perhaps you should have answered their question. So the first follower asked him, does Krishna ever speak Bhagavad Gita in the hellish planets, the hellish realms? And he said, he took a side swipe at my country. He said, every time I come to Britain, it is like a hellish realm. He said, it is always dark, it is always cold, it is always raining.
Wow.
He said. So much so for the first question. Second question was, you have said that there's 8,400,000 species of life, and 400,000 of them are the human form. Can you tell me something about the 400,000 different types of human?
Oh, it's a good question.
It's a good question.
Yeah. Which
is exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
And I sort of rubbed my hands and I thought, okay, no, we're going to get to business. Here's a good question. And Prabhupada said, that is not important.
Wow.
So I thought, well, how disappointing. Perfect chance to explain something. Because I also thought that was a good question. And then Prabhupada spoke. And I could understand that the level at which he wanted to communicate with his disciples in that brief space of time. Firstly, he was in control of what he wanted to say. Although he asked 4 questions, it was he bypassed superficial detail of the philosophy to concentrate on the main points.
Right.
And that's what he wanted to get over to people. And it seemed, as the years went by, I noticed that that was a consistent behavior on his part. There are lots of details, but the main thing I want to tell you is this. It's about Krishna, and it's about your connection with Krishna. And it's about the fact that you're in Maya, and that you should really try to remember Krishna, and this is how you do it. This seemed to be the main presentation, wherever he went, whatever he was doing.
Right. And now tell us that story that you told me earlier. That's a fantastic story.
Well, it was a story that was told to me.
To you, yeah. I just think that's such an awesome story to share.
It was just, there's a phenomenon early in the morning in Indian cities where, let's just say, the restrooms aren't completely 100% available to the poverty-stricken section of society.
Yeah.
Neither are there public toilets. So the early morning scene, as it were, is for people to go to a patch of wasteland or the beach, and to, should we say, do their ablutions. And sometimes they sit in a row and they talk.
Right.
As they're doing it. So if you're not careful and you're unsuspecting, in the morning you're presented with a line of, should we say, rear ends. And Prabhupada was out walking one day, and he said, just see. He said, these poor people are not embarrassed to do what they have to do at this place in public.
Yeah.
He said, similarly, he said, all of you should never be embarrassed. What is inside must come out. So you should never be embarrassed to spread Krishna consciousness. Your love of Krishna is inside, it must come out. Wow. And wherever you go, in public, never be afraid to let it out.
Amazing. I love that. I just love that story so much.
Well, because we are, aren't we? We're embarrassed. It's even there are many philosophers and many teachers that say that religion is a private thing. And as long as you practice it in your own home, that's fine.
Yeah.
As soon as you start sharing your belief system with someone else who hasn't invited you to do so, that's somehow wrong. But that's the way that great ideas are broadcast.
Exactly.
And we are a community of people who believes that we have a set of good ideas that is worthy of a greater audience in the world. Just like if I'm the managing director of Coca-Cola, I will not flinch at putting up a sign anywhere. Coca-Cola. Coke is the real thing.
Right.
Coke is life. Coke is anything. I will tell you that the whole universe will improve if people drink Coke, because that's my product. So similarly, if your product is a belief in Krishna, the Supreme Person, you should be able to market that, advertise that anywhere, uninvited. No one has ever invited me, did I want to see a Coke sign? No one's invited. It's just, you pay for the advertising and you get it done, and it's in a public place.
Right. So
we can't, as devotees of Krishna, we can't wait for that invitation. Prabhupada said one time, he said, he was making this comparison between two words, passive and aggressive. Now, when we use the word aggressive, sometimes we mean violence, but it doesn't actually mean. It means a positive commitment to an action, to an external action. So he said, if I was passive, nothing would have happened. He said, I have to be preaching is aggressive, teaching, sharing something is an aggressive act. So we do it for materialism, but sometimes when it comes to spirituality, we become very, very shy.
Yeah, I guess it could be the lack of faith in the person, in the practitioner, for them, because what do you think? Is it a lack of faith or embarrassment?
There's a great little film of Buddhist monks being trained in the art of debate.
Yeah.
And what happens is that they take the entire monastery and they pair up, and one Buddhist monk will make a proposition, and the other Buddhist monk will try and defeat it with Sanskrit quotation or logic or another appeal to reason. And so they practice this. And I think sometimes, although we may be personally convinced in our own swadhyaya, our own private reading, we're not exercised generally as devotees in the art of tarka, or argumentation and debate. And so we become flummoxed when presented with even the most simple question.
Definitely, yeah.
Or the most simple challenge to Krishna consciousness. We may feel that we have to retreat or be nice.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that, but first, more about you personally. So you kind of came in contact with Krishna devotees when you were 17. Then you traveled throughout Europe and England, and spread Krishna consciousness with book distribution and chanting in the street and etc. And then eventually you got married, and you've been married for now.
To cut a long story short.
Yeah.
A very long story.
Yes. You've been married now for 36 years.
36 years.
36 years. Congratulations on that. That's a great example for us all. And then so right after Srila Prabhupada's departure, when he passed away in 77. You weren't married yet, but then what was the atmosphere like after his leaving?
I would say for me and the people around me, which is the only people I can comment on, the atmosphere was of a great vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And
before the reason I asked that is because a lot of people left at that time, and a lot of people couldn't continue their faith because of that. Srila Prabhupada was such a part of them, such a part of their faith.
Yeah.
So I want to understand for those who have been around for so long. You've been around 40 plus years. Like, what kept you going after his departure?
First of all, I think that part of our history has been created for us by revisionist historians. A revisionist historian is someone who takes something and wants to create a fresh narrative.
Right.
And it's usually to serve his own interest. There's usually some political persuasiveness. And so it makes sense for a revisionist historian to create this image that Prabhupada left, and immediately thousands of his followers left. It wasn't the case. I'd say the attrition rate was slow. It was a trickle over maybe 5 to 7 years.
Oh, really?
And much of that was natural, because people were, the age of the average disciple was, Prabhupada had 4,800 disciples. The average age of them was, should we say at that time, was 25 to 28. So some of them, they didn't leave Krishna consciousness, they didn't leave Prabhupada, but they left the communes that we had created.
Oh, I see.
In order to restart their education, in order to begin a family, and that you couldn't do. The average size of our temples in 1976, from records that we have, was sort of a suburban house with the average was 15 to 20 people.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't fit many more people in a suburban house. So if you got married, you had to have alternative accommodation. To have alternative accommodation, you have to have a job. To have a job, you have to have qualifications. So these things, qualifications, job, and alternative accommodation, is a package of items that really most people had to travel some distance away from the temple to do that. But so I think it's a skewing of history if we say that there was this immediate uprising of people that couldn't take to, and often it's said that the new ISKCON gurus, the 11 zonal acharyas, made life so difficult for people that they had to leave. It just wasn't the case. It wasn't the case really until the crunch, I would say, came in 85. 85 or 86, you could say. Okay. Which was, 9 years. So 9 years later, many people made that choice because of that particular reason.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
in other words, the pre that time, we had an organization that was run by one person, and then after that time we had an organization run by 11, or some people say 11 organizations that were very loosely tied together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I felt like that was a really powerful thing to have the one teacher or one acharya for a section, because you even see that naturally now. Like, there are some gurus that frequent certain places and they're basically the acharya of that certain place.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
It was sort of Prabhupada's idea, but there was he had said, his expression was, "You become initiated by whoever is nearest."
Right.
So there was, we don't know exactly what he meant, but there was some type of geographical pragmatism involved in that. It's not that a devotee living in Fiji should really have to travel to Sweden in order to find a guru.
Right.
Let's keep things practical, and let's so each of the areas of the world, zones as we call them, would have one person. However, what happened was that those persons, as time went by, forced those who could not see them to in the light of being a guru, or rather could not see them as a guru. They were more or less, should we say, pressured or socially obliged to take that person as a guru. So there was some coercion, and some negative energy was created by that. But the original idea was that whoever is nearest would chant on the beads and give you a name, as it was from maybe 1972 all the way through to 1977.
Right.
We had that system.
Right.
So we already had a zonal system, and Prabhupada's idea was that the GBC members that he had, they would become gurus, and they would complete the function by chanting on the beads and giving a name. And already before he passed away, the name did not have to be sent to him. So we had that.
Changing gears a little bit.
Let's change gear.
Yeah, we'll come back to this. I love the guru talk, and I also want to, you're an author as well, so I'd like to introduce people to your book and everything. But so now your service has been for a number of years to develop congregations, and specifically at Bhaktivedanta Manor, right? So coming to America, where I personally think the congregations are less developed, what has been your observation of American ISKCON in America? And people say, there's only Indians that are running the temples, and ISKCON is changing. It's not what it used to be, and things like that. So what's been your observation, and what do you think about that?
Of course, my observation of ISKCON in America is very limited. It's very, very limited to one or at the most two of the 50 states.
I mean, you went to New Vrindavan recently for the mantra retreat. After since 82 or something, you had been to New Vrindavan. That's a different New Vrindavan, I would say.
So let's say I've seen 3 of the states, very briefly. But to me, there's different realities, and these realities apply to any of our ISKCON branches all over the world. One is that whereas in the past 90 95% of devotees lived communally. Now 95% don't.
Yeah, outside the temple.
And so that's a new reality, and it's a new ISKCON, and we have to deal with that. And although we are a broadcast organization, to systematically propagate, that's the first line of our 7 purposes. We do that, but then broadcast is an old agricultural term. It means to take a basket of seeds and to throw them into the field. But when the seeds begin to grow, then you have to be much more concerned with watering, sunshine, pulling out the weeds, and generally scaring off any creatures that could come and eat the new shoots. I think that wherever ISKCON has successfully broadcast, then they need to be good farmers and look after the tender shoots.
Interesting.
So that means providing support services to those people who have said, yes, I'm into this. To me, people divide into some very simple categories. Seekers of the truth, people who've decided that Krishna, that's one. 2 is people who've decided that Krishna consciousness at least answers the majority of their questions.
Right.
3, people who are chanting on a daily basis, and 4th category is people who've made a commitment of some kind. Might be just a commitment to chant 4 rounds, or it might be, second initiation, whatever it is, it's a commitment.
Right.
So what are the spiritual services that those people in each of the 4 categories needs? It's like you've just had a new baby. You will know that babies, they need different types of maintenance.
Yes.
They need different services, and they need baby food.
Yeah.
They can't eat the same as other people. They can't chew. Why? Because they have no teeth. So when people come to any form of spiritual life, be it ourselves or be it any other religion, in the beginning they have no teeth. Vedanta, yeah. They don't have a very sharp way of chewing over the philosophy. So they need guidance, and they need tuition. They need support services. And the main thing people need is encouragement. Encouragement means to give courage. And the reason you give courage is because a person feels afraid of taking the next step in spiritual life, because it will involve leaving something that they are comfortable with to something that they may be uncomfortable with. So it's either in philosophical terms, belief, faith issues, or it may be in the practice. So if you're prepared to give people a long transition period, you'll know that they need appropriate levels of encouragement and support according to their period. So first thing we have to do in our agricultural phase of ISKCON is to listen to people, to find out what they like and what they don't like, what they have issues with, what they're worried about, what they're afraid of. I always tell people that being a good preacher, teacher, outreacher, use whichever word you like. If you don't like preach, is to be nice.
Yeah, definitely.
To be nice. N-I-C-E. N means what a person's needs. So find out what a person's needs are. I means what are they interested in Krishna consciousness, in spiritual life. What interests them? Develop that. C, what are their concerns? What are they worried about? Deal with that. And E is what are their expectations? What do they expect you to be for them? What do they expect you to do for them? Try and over satisfy someone's expectations rather than under satisfy them.
Yeah.
And you'll always have a satisfied congregation. Congregation just means people who consider themselves to belong to something and who come together occasionally to celebrate it, talk about it, enjoy it, like that. It could be a society of, pumpkin appreciators. Okay? Society of pumpkin appreciators. What do? Well, they come together and they talk about pumpkins.
Right.
They may not live in each other's houses, they may not live communally, but that doesn't mean that they're not interested. So my belief is that the Krishna community worldwide has a lot more people than we believe we have because of the success of our outreach. And the second phase that is really upon us now, in Europe and America, being those places that got Krishna consciousness first, is to alter the way we look at the results. Let's give ourselves a slap on the back for our achievements.
Brilliant.
But realize that we have to do a different type of work now. It may not always all be about selling books, because some people have got the books. In fact, we have sold or distributed, however you like to phrase it, we've more than 500-600 million books. That's more than any other spiritual organization apart from Christianity and Islam. So what do we do with that statistic?
Yeah.
That means some people have read the books. Let's hope to God that some people have read the books. Because if no one's read them, then we're distributing the wrong book.
Right.
Or a slightly more complex book than people, have the appreciation for. So if people have read them and they've appreciated them, which I believe they have, because I used to work in the capacity of a person who was, before the internet days, myself and my wife used to answer all the letters from people who had received books.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we would be able to gauge which book produced the most results, and also we'd get to hear from people almost instantly. Instantly in those days was within a month.
Right.
And they would tell us, look, I like this book. What do I read now? What do I do now? And where do I go now?
Yeah.
My belief is that ISKCON also has to be very careful, because all these questions, what do I do, what do I read, where do I go, people try to answer that by Google. And when you Google ISKCON or Hare Krishna, you may not always get the most helpful body of information.
Definitely.
Because now we have a history. We now have 50 years of history. And some of it has been quite colourful. and not always so helpful.
Yeah.
So the idea now is that ISKCON's face needs to be more personal, and we have to meet with people personally. And each person, dare I mention the word, has to be a guru.
Each person has to be a guru?
Each person has to be a guru, in the sense of Amara Agyaya Guru.
Yeah.
You have to have some personal responsibility.
Yeah.
For the person who's in front of you.
Definitely.
In other words, that we have left it far too long to just a slender number of charismatic leaders to take on the role of encouragement and having a sense of propriety for people or temple presidents to manage those people. And that's not good enough.
Yeah, it's something like 70 something, 80, almost 80 gurus for a society that has hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. Well, the point is that we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
Even Dr. Burt Rochford doesn't know.
Right.
In fact, nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how successful we are.
Yeah.
Or how much of a failure we are. But those who want to present ISKCON as being a failure, they will say, just see, all the temples in America are empty. Now, from the 3 temples that I've seen, the American temples, they're not empty. In fact, they're buzzing with dynamism. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there is.
But if you want to have that view, you can have that view, and no one can counter that view, because we don't know how many members we have. Okay, and why do you not know how many members you have? Every temple knows how much money it has. Usually it doesn't have. And you know how many people come to the temple on a Sunday. And you may know how many books you've sold. But worldwide, if you don't know how many members you have, it's probably because you're not counting them. And usually you count what you value. So if you value something, you count it. Just like I like pumpkins, so I can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have them here. or I can count how many minutes this interview will go on, because we have to fit it into a certain time.
Right.
We're counting everything except the numbers of members we have.
That's really interesting.
What does that mean? It means it's an organization that really we don't care, because a broadcast organization doesn't really care so much how many seeds go out. You see? As long as the seeds are going out. We measure how many seeds go out rather than how many sprout up. See?
Wow.
But a farming organization, a gardening organization, seeds, that's interesting. But the most important thing is, how many plants do we have? What is sprouted? What do we need to take care of?
Okay, well, a question for you.
So the real question is, who's supposed to do that? Is it the gurus, where we have a ratio of, as you say, 80, 90 gurus, or sannyasis, if you want to include everybody, 130, 150 charismatic leaders who are taking personally the responsibility of looking after people. It's an impossible ratio. So it means really that every member has to be a harvester, every member has to be a gardener, an encourager, a guider, an enhancer of people's spirituality. So it means that each of us should be able to say, if I come to you and I say, how's your spiritual life? The answer is usually, well, I'm chanting this number of rounds, or I'm getting up at this time in the morning, or this is my service, etc. like that. But as devotees, I really think we should ask each other the question, how is your cultivation? Who are you looking after? Who are you helping?
Right.
Because at the end of it, a movement is really all about a movement, and a movement is dynamic. When I was a kid, when I was 13, there was this big festival in upstate New York called Woodstock, and I had the poster, the movie poster on my wall, and I was so entranced by that, because I thought, I want to be part of a movement. I want to be part of a movement that will change the world, And the key thing that interested me in ISKCON was that it was a movement that would change the world.
Right.
At least that's what they told me. But now, how do you know if you're changing the world? Well, by the time we got to Woodstock, we were 500,000 strong. Okay, that's how you know that Woodstock was a phenomenal thing in the history of the USA, because there were so many people involved. So if an organization doesn't know how many people it has, then it may not be a movement. It may be a church that's not really communicating to its members. And that I would say is the only problem that we have. We're hoist by our own success.
I really like the point you made that we need to change the way we look at our results.
Yeah.
That's super interesting to me, because for as long as I've known, it's always been how many people are coming to the feast or something, or how many books have gone out, how many Lakshmi points, which is such a funny term, how many Lakshmi points, or or how many people shaved up, or how many people became bhaktas or something. So we really need to rethink that.
Yeah. See, in 1973, Prabhupada wrote a letter. In 1973, Prabhupada wrote a letter to us in England. I wasn't there, but I inherited the results of that letter when I came the following summer. He said, in every town you go, do these 6 things. Distribute my books, give out some free information, give out a small quantity of prasadam, answer people's questions, go on Harinam Sankirtan, singing in the streets, and organize an event, a meeting, in a house, an office, place of work, or in a hall. And do these things and go everywhere and teach without anxiety. So his point was, do these 6 things, because these 6 things represent the the full reaching out to people. And Tribhuvanath took that up. Tribhuvanath was an old friend of mine who actually brought me to Krishna consciousness from a rain-soaked pop festival, not once but twice actually.
It's quite a famous devotee in England.
Very famous devotee, yeah. Because he, he took it upon himself to intervene in what people were doing in order to bring them to Krishna. And so he took that instruction and he created a festival program in which there was prasadam and singing and books and answering people's questions, etc. And then in the early 70s, there was a push for book distribution because America had started doing big book distribution.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada was writing letters and he was giving talks about book distribution and Sankirtan, and everyone should go out on the Sankirtan party. So Tribhuvannath was a little confused because Prabhupada had also written to him about how much he appreciated the festival program. So on a morning walk, he said to Prabhupada, you like book distribution and you also like festivals. Should we stop festivals and just do book distribution? And Prabhupada stopped walking and he turned round to him as he did sometimes in order to make a point.
Yeah.
He pointed his cane at him and he said, no, everything should go on side by side. And I think that got lost. And it got lost as ISKCON went from being a pioneering organization to a group that needed to maintain the buildings that it had rented or bought. So the only Brahminical things that you do don't often bring in money. Yajana, Patana, Patana. There's only 2 of those 6 that bring in money for a Brahmin or bring in wealth. So similarly, singing in the streets doesn't bring in money. Answering people's questions, a whole program, giving out prasadam, you're all giving.
Yeah.
The only thing that brings it in is when you sell a book. That's a commercial activity. And so the other 5 got diminished in favor of the one that we knew was, not only pleasing but also had cash benefits. So I think that we need to rejoice actually in everything that Prabhupada has given us, and to not rely on the history of ISKCON and what we perceive as being the models that we used as being our permanent legacy. Prabhupada talked about his American boys and girls as being creative. He said, "What's the point?" He said one time, "What's the point of being an American if you don't use your American brain to do something glorious, to do something wonderful?"
Yeah.
So we did it before, and we can do it again. America can become the world leader quite easily. It's you're born an American for a particular reason.
Right.
Leadership. And so leadership and spirituality is there. And I don't think it's a problem that our temples are somewhat, should we say, ethnocentric at the moment. It's a phase.
Really? You think so?
Yeah, it's a phase. There are other phases. Because I'll give you an example that in London, Prabhupada had started a temple. We had started a temple near the British Museum.
Right. Oh, I love that.
And there
Bury
was
Place, right?
Bury Place. And there was another place called Notting Hill. They made a movie about this place. Trendy, upmarket. And a lot of alternative thinkers were there in the 1960s, early 70s. So Prabhupada wanted also a temple there because the devotees were telling them the reception was always good in Notting Hill. So he started making arrangements for a set of Radha Krishna deities to come from Delhi to go to this new temple. And then someone, said to Prabhupada, "Well, Prabhupada, it's kind of like you may not realize this, but Notting Hill is only 5 miles away from the Bury Place temple where we already have a temple." He said, London is so big. He said you could have 10 temples there, easily. So he was admonishing the devotees for thinking small. And I think that what we may have done is that when we have 1 or 2 temples per state, we're thinking that's it, the preaching work is done.
Yeah.
1 or 2 well, we have we have 1 temple in New York, 2 temples in New York now. We have a couple in New Jersey. That's it. We're covered.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to take up Krishna consciousness can come to those temples. Yes, they can, but you have to understand that only if a person is really, really interested do they travel 80 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles round trip.
Yeah.
We're asking people to do a lot.
It's true.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about your book. You're an author, and I wanted to talk a bit about this book. So this book is called The Guru and Disciple Book. It's a very comprehensive book. I read half of it. I haven't got to, life has been busy, but it's a wonderful book about the relationship between guru disciple, the history of gurus in ISKCON as well as just in India as well. What made you kind of want to write a book like as this comprehensive about such a seemingly simple idea of just a guru and a disciple?
It's a simple idea, isn't it? But
yeah.
It's surprising how we can get it wrong.
Right. Oh, really? Get it wrong, huh?
Well, we can get it so badly wrong.
Right. Yeah.
The guru disciple is a very simple thing, but as one psychologist, spiritualist, commentator said, for the Western mind and culture, it is not ego-syntonic. Ego-syntonic means it's not compatible so much with our sense of who we are that we need someone in our life that's a guru figure. So we struggle with that a little bit. Whereas in the Eastern world, every family has a guru, and you sort of, it's as part of life as you live it. So I noticed that I was getting asked the same questions over and over again. So I thought, and the questions were in three categories. What is a guru? How do I find one? What am I looking for? I've heard that there's some bad gurus in ISKCON in the past. What went wrong? There were generally in those areas. And if I do have a guru, what will I be expected to do? So those sort of questions. We started a course before the ISKCON Disciple course came out 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago now. We started a one-day course because people needed to have some education in these things. So it was a course about the guru-disciple relationship. 6 hours in which we took them through the main Sanskrit text related to guru-disciple. Some modern history of ISKCON. ISKCON is really, it's only one organization which has sought to transplant the guru-disciple relationship from an Eastern context, cultural context, to the West. And the question we had to ask ourselves is, how have we done? Because from the 60s through to now, there's a lot of transplantation going on. So when you transplant something from one pot into another pot, sometimes some of the leaves fall off.
Yeah.
And so we weren't alone in getting it wrong sometimes. So we had to tell our students something about that and give them some practical, classical advice, as well as some modern advice about what does it mean to be a disciple, what is a guru supposed to do for you, what is expecting too much, what is expecting not enough, how does it all work into your life. So generally they were quite happy, but there were some outstanding questions that I thought could have been dealt with in further depth. And then there were some myths, some myths in ISKCON. And I thought that I would pop the bubble of myths. And that's what I did in one section of this book. And there was also some consistent ways in which ISKCON was kind of shooting itself in the foot, over the years. And I felt we had to reinvestigate Vaishnava history to see if there was better ways of doing something. Because we used to be a small organization run by one very powerful person, and now we're a very large organization run by many multifaceted galaxy of galaxy of persons. So how does it all work? How does it all fit together?
Yeah.
So I looked at the Sri Sampradaya, I looked at what Ramanuja did, and some of that was very interesting. Philosophically, I know that we're different, but structurally, as far as maintaining the health, the spiritual health of sannyasis, particularly, which we unfortunately didn't have a completely clear history of doing, looking after congregation. Are there any things that we could learn? And so I did that research, and I found that some interesting ideas.
Wow. When you talk about myths, could you give an example?
Well, the major myth is that only sannyasis should initiate disciples.
Yeah, it's like once you take sannyas, it's like you're expected to take on disciples. Or if you're a grihastha, you can't. You can't, yeah.
Well, the history actually goes back to the time when Buddhists took over, because the sannyasis, they didn't initiate, they couldn't initiate because they were traveling. So to teach shlokas, which was the traditional way of teaching anything, it was by call and response. So the guru chants the shloka and the disciple responds, just like we do every day in the Bhagavatam class.
Yeah.
At least, several times. And you learn the texts by recitation. And you learn recitation when you're young. So what it means is that the guru-disciple relationship begins usually at the age of 8. Between 8 to 12, you become initiated. And then you go to the guru, and the guru teaches you. Now, in order for that to happen, the guru has to be in one place.
Yeah.
Because the guru has to provide shelter, lodging, clothing, and food to the young disciples. So that is a traditional relationship there. And he and his wife can only do that if they're supported by local villagers or by the king. Now, sannyasi leads a completely different type of life. He's traveling. He's only allowed to stay 3 days in one place. So he didn't initiate. So along comes Buddhism, and Buddhism borrows from the sannyasis by, the sannyasis during the monsoon season, they live in a place called a guha, or a cave. They're a convocation of sannyasis. They flock together and they live together. So Buddhism borrowed that, but instead of doing it for 4 months, they did it for 12, and they lived in the cities. So Buddhism gradually took over India by capturing the major cities and setting up universities for the teaching of not only spiritual life but also secular life. In other words, you'd go to a Buddhist university. In the morning you would learn texts. In the afternoon you would learn architecture or accounting or medicine.
Right.
And that's how. And then the disciples would go all over India. So Shankracharya wanted to drive Buddhism out of India, both with philosophy, but also with a similar arrangement. So Shankracharya, who was born in around 800 AD, he brought his sannyasis back into the city, and he began initiating and teaching. The sannyasis didn't travel as much as before. They were in one place, and that gradually took over from Buddhism. And then came the Vaishnavas, who did a similar thing. But Vaishnavism has never had an exclusivity of sannyasis giving teaching. Teaching simply means that you begin a course of teaching with an initiation. That's what it means. So Ramanuja Acharya, when he was passing away, he chose 74 gurus to succeed him in initiation and teaching, and he distributed them widely around India. And so I thought that was very interesting, because 74 is a very, you really mean business. So some of them were sannyasis, but most of them were grihastas. And that line has continued down to the present day. So it's a very good way of having a good geographical reach, making initiation available to all, which is, initiation is nothing more than a teaching strategy. That's all it is. But in ISKCON, because of the blueprint that we had, the template that we had a single Acharya, sannyasi, renounced, traveling and initiating and doing everything. So we've modeled everything on that. My challenge would be that it's no longer practicable to keep that model as the only model.
Right.
Sannyasis are becoming exhausted physically and mentally.
Oh yeah.
It's very expensive, and we would do better to look at that. It's good for pioneering. In other words, sannyasis are good for teaching and opening up new borders, but for consolidated teaching and caring for congregation, then the grihastas have to step up to look after things.
Is that what you mean by shooting yourself in the foot type?
Well, shooting ourselves in the foot, people look at ISKCON and they say we have a guru problem, but actually we have a sannyasi problem, if anything, or we have had, in the sense that sannyasis are meant to move away from Dhanam, Janam and Sundarim. But a sannyasi in ISKCON is immediately given Dhanam, Janam and Sundarim.
Dhanam, Janam, Sundarim meaning?
Power, wealth, the attention, the female attention in the form of followers. Mm-hmm. All these things are meant to be, sannyasi is meant to move away from those things.
All right.
Traditional definition of sannyas. So if you rejig the characteristics of sannyas to say that it has money, fame, power, tuition, initiation, women followers, then management, responsibility, then what you're saying is you're foisting an undue level of responsibility on someone who was really meant to be a simple monk.
Right.
You know.
That's very interesting.
This is not. I'm not criticizing him.
Oh, of course, no.
I'm just saying that we shouldn't be surprised if we have problems if you're making someone do something that their way of life wasn't designed for. That's
true.
all.
Yeah, that's true. Now, talking more about grihastas, you raised 3 very nice children, and you had been married for so long. Tell us a little bit about some of the ways you went about it that you feel were successful, and what young grihastas like me and whoever's watching we can look out for when we become parents or become husbands and wives. Like you've also counseled many married couples, so what kind of trends have you seen where things are going wrong, or things that are done right, or whatever?
I would say that on the negative side we have situations where a young couple, young grihasta team, young family, I would say they don't often get the level of support that they require.
Okay.
Often because it's a new situation. For the first few years of your married life, it is a very new situation that you have to struggle to accommodate new realities. At that point, you need a senior person to help you. There's someone who's been married for some time.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing I'd say is that often when we try to disentangle ourselves from material energy, we draw a line between Maya and Krishna. And for our children, we may also try to do that. This is very wrong. This is right. But in doing so, we may set up a very sharp duality where it's impossible for them to reconcile the world in which they're living with the world in which you want them to live.
Interesting.
We don't have... every child is a unique individual, and so requires the parent to understand their level of attraction or not for Krishna, Prabhupada said that attraction for Krishna is natural within a child, but that needs to be developed, and it's developed through nature rather than in spite of it. Third is to understand that a child coming to Krishna consciousness does so in a different way than an adult does. Many of us were converts to Krishna. In other words, we reached a point in our life where we had to find spirituality, and we did so. And we made a choice. Some of us became Buddhists, and some of us became Christians, and so there was a point of conversion. Our children may not have such a point in their life, so we, at the same time as allowing them to be in the world and find their own horizons, we cannot depend on them making a conversion choice when they're 16, 17, 18. It may never come. So I do talk with some devotee parents who say, well, I don't know if my child wants to be a devotee of Krishna. I'm just waiting until they're 18 and they can make their own choices like I did. No, it may not happen like that. Our job is to really give them the best possible understanding of how material nature, spiritual nature, and our connection with the two fit together. And that's our duty as parents, to illuminate our children, to enlighten them, but with compassion and love and fun. You know, Krishna consciousness for the grown-ups is it involves hard choices. It involves giving up things.
Yes.
But for children, they have to, you know, the very idea of giving something up is alien to them. So you have to find what is the most pleasing for them that will remind them of Krishna, what is the most fun for them. So games, theatre, puppet shows, books, storytelling, trips, you know, anything can be used to develop love of Krishna in a very gradual way. So an adult is an adult and a child is a child. We're both trying to be Krishna conscious, but the way the adult helps the child become Krishna conscious is by padam, 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 by slow degrees.
So you used all those things when you were raising your children?
I think so. I think so. We tried to. However, my wife is more of the children's educator than I ever was.
Right.
So there was a good deal of, should we call it, homeschooling without being official homeschooling. And my wife went on to become headmistress of the primary school, where our third child then went. But first, second, third children, they all had their mother's influence in their life, much more than mine. So there's an old Chinese story. A man comes to a goldfish, and he asks the goldfish, he says, how's the water? And the goldfish looks at him and says, what water? There's water all around him, but he can't see it. So Krishna consciousness is like that. When you grow up in an atmosphere of Krishna consciousness, it shouldn't be a strain. There should be no, certainly not a physical coercion or an emotional blackmail of children in order to coerce them. But if it's fun, then they will take it up.
Right. Your
job is to make it fun as a parent.
Yeah.
Age appropriate. Always age appropriate fun.
Definitely. Is there a reason why you... I mean, I had to have one children, and it's like a big deal. You think that their upbringing did having more than one child have something to do with the way they were raised and the way they are now?
Well, I speak to some young couples, and they say, yes, now we're married, but both of us have come to a decision that we're not going to have children.
Right.
And we feel that we've made that decision based on our spiritual commitment. Again, I think that's a misuse of the ashram just as much as a sannyasi who is advised to take on female attention and power and money and influence.
Yeah.
Grihastha ashram is for having children. That's why you do it. If you don't want to have children, if you can't have children, that's one thing. But if you say that you don't want children, then don't become a grihastha. Why are you doing that?
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, it's a height of selfishness to do that. The whole point of being a grihastha is to have children, and then some grihasthas just have one child. But that's all right. But we really need to understand that you can have more. And Western Europe, America, Scandinavia, many countries now, there are many couples living without children, and or deciding not to have children, or not being married, or and the situation is that we have reached a kind of tipping point where if people in those countries don't start having more children as they used to pre-1967, then we shall have a problem, just even a financial problem, political problem, because in any society the young working people have to pay for the old people, and it's already at a point now where we don't have enough young working people to pay for the elderly, the costs of the elderly. So any society that doesn't have children will implode eventually. So in ISKCON now we're on a third generation, and we have to see that having more children is not a crime, having more children is not a problem, but you can actually benefit the society by having more children, especially if those children are devoted to Krishna, or have an affinity for Krishna, or those who love Krishna.
Yeah, I mean, you at least want to replace yourself, like you and your wife, for the future.
If you want to replace yourself, that's 2 children.
Right, that's 2 children, yeah.
And if you want to be of more service to society, that's 3.
Yeah.
So we have, we have some work to do.
Yeah.
But the difficulty is that we find that many of our members are disinclined. In other words, renunciation is the ideal, but renunciation is the ideal for the renunciates. Renunciation is not the ideal for those who are married. Because their prescription is a different way of dealing with the world. Which means that we would have bigger communities, and in the future we'll have more people to teach others the joyful life of Krishna consciousness.
Definitely. What else I didn't? What's the time? 1:08. What else did I want to ask you about? Oh yes, okay. There are a lot of couples that don't get married because or they don't have the Vedic samskar for marriage. That it's not important. What would you say to that, being a priest? You've done thousands of marriages.
Or some that they can't afford it. Well, that's what they say.
So what do you feel is important about getting married, or having that kind of samskar or impression?
Well, it's very simple. If you say that ISKCON is a spiritual movement, but it's also a religion. Religion comes from the word religare, which means to tie together, to bind together. So when we are bound together as a society, we follow common principles and common rules, and we honor each other by our different status in society. So the married status is usually one which is where a person has a emotional, financial, sexual, and publicly witnessed union.
Right.
And that is often accompanied by the blessings of God invoked upon the couple by the congregation. And it would be a great shame actually if ISKCON was the only religion in the world that didn't have weddings. Specifically when the founder Acharya introduced a very simple form of Vaishnava wedding. And some people give different reasons. And it's unfortunate that sometimes they sound very, very reasonable reasons, very philosophical reasons. But there is no philosophical reason that can be extended over and above Shastra. Shastra is the, that's where it all stops. So Shastra says that there are 4 ashrams, and there is a ceremony for entering into each one, and a very simple ceremony for a married couple, or a couple to become married. There's only a few ingredients. One is that the father gives permission, and then the groom is honored. The couple make their vows. There is a sacred fire. They walk around the fire. They take the 7 steps, and the congregation bless them. That's a Vaishnava wedding. So for that, it costs some firewood, some ghee, some rice, some flowers, a banana, and perhaps feeding the devotees who come. It's not difficult. There really is no reason not to do it. But Kali Yuga is a yuga in which people live together simply for convenience and pragmatism. And so what happened is that when our devotees themselves become influenced by the external community, what happens is that we start living like them. So living together means that there is an escape door in the relationship. It means that if I live with you and I don't like it, after some time I can walk out that door, because I'm not legally bound and I'm not religiously bound.
Right.
And sometimes, and I'm afraid to say this, that sometimes even our leaders sometimes have either knowingly or unknowingly condoned this state of affairs, not wishing to have the sanctity of the fire yajna challenged by yet another divorce. And so people are becoming legally married but without being religiously married. This is a very sad state of affairs. It means that our culture we're losing our culture. And for a young couple not to be married, I think is missing out on the great blessing that a firm religious commitment makes. Now they may say that, well, Krishna knows, and if Krishna's in our heart and we're making a promise to each other, then what difference does it make? Yeah. But you also want the blessings of the Vaishnavas. We also want to continue a culture that we already have. We also want to continue a culture that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada introduced to us, who even performed the weddings himself. Yeah. And let's continue that, because in the 3rd generation after, it will disappear.
Someone can say it's not my culture. We have a lot of, we're attracting many people of different cultures to join Krishna consciousness. That's not my culture. That's Indian culture. That's Indian ritual.
Indian ritual. Well, then don't wear tilak, neck beads, or use japa beads, or worship Krishna. It's all Indian. You could argue that it's all Indian. However, if you accept that Krishna is universal, Krishna's name recited on beads is the universal practice for the age, which is the basic premise of ISKCON. If you accept that much, then surely to sit down with the love of your life for an hour, in which various Sanskrit prayers are chanted for your benefit and for your blessing, while being surrounded by senior practitioners who want to congratulate you, to witness your vows, and to help you on your way in life. Right. What is the problem there?
What is the problem? What's the difficulty? I agree.
So you can have various forms, but we should get to know. Our particular form is known as Pancharatra. It is dictated by the Lord Himself. It's a corollary of Vedic culture, and it involves the worship of the Lord in His, in His form. And why not get to know that?
Yeah.
There's a lot of aspects that, when a young couple get married, it's not that they always understand why the marriage has taken a certain form. If you're Jewish, you may not know why you crush the glass at the end of the wedding. If you're a Vaishnava, you may not know why it is that we have fire. Why do we have a pot and a coconut? You may not know these things, but you should know that somebody does. And it may not be that you can be that you can know everything when you're so young. So this is the way that a wedding has been handed down to us for thousands of years. Just take that and honor it and move forward with it, and understand that that is the moment at which you are genuinely married, not when the government servant signs a particular form for you in the town hall. That's there as well. You can do that as well, but don't get too excited about that particular ritual. 10 minutes of it, it has its own particular form, and we need to do that. But there are some particular forms that we need to keep. Sometimes people say to me, "Well, this is it's kind of Hindu shmendu stuff."
Yeah.
Besides, fire yagyas are not the process for the age. And I say,
all you have to do is chant Hare Krishna.
Chant Hare Krishna. But neither are we saying that the fire yagya for the wedding is the process for the age. But it is the process for weddings.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that you get wedded. It's not that you get married every day by fire yagya, and that's how we rise above the difficulties of Kali Yuga. We chant the Lord's name every day. That's what we do. But at one time in your life, on one morning or one afternoon of your life, why not do it properly? Now, there is a problem because sometimes the senior leaders don't insist, and then the disciples live together, and there's always a good reason. Well, the parents couldn't come, or this didn't happen, or they have to do this first, or the visa requirements aren't there. So I see many supposedly good reasons, but it's all contributing to a culture in which the wedding is rapidly disappearing for the next generation. And if it disappears this generation, then it will be completely absent in the next. And we will have lost something.
Yeah, something I heard was that there was a huge marriage going down the street in India, and there was a lot of fanfare and a huge thing, expensive, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And someone said, "Oh, the reason they do this was so it's such a public thing. It's like the whole town knows about it. The whole city knows about that you're getting married, that you've made this vow in front of everyone, and that's what keeps it together. It's a reason to keep it together because you've done it in front of everyone. You've announced to the fact that I'm going to live with this person and be faithful to them for my whole life. So that's a big part of keeping the thing together, is because of your reputation and whatnot.
Because it was witnessed by everyone in the village, by everyone in the town.
Yeah, I think that's
it also helps the other people in the town as well, because they're also recommitting in their relationship to their own partners.
Exactly.
Through your wedding. So
Tulsi always cries at weddings.
There's a social glue.
Yeah.
That's important, because the commitment of marriage is a difficult one. Commitment to any of the ashrams is difficult. Yeah. If you're a brahmachari, the commitment is difficult. Being married is difficult. Being a sannyas is difficult. So you choose your fight, but it will be difficult. So in order to help you, you need just like in Africa they say it takes an entire village to raise a child, and it takes an entire village to keep a man and a woman, happily living together.
A phenomenon I see nowadays as well is that a man will not be a grihastha, nor will he be living in the temple as a brahmachari. And he wouldn't want to because they don't want to get married, because it's kind of a headache. So it's just like this kind of fifth ashram where it's a a man in limbo type kind of thing.
We have 8 ashrams.
8 ashrams.
8 ashrams. We have the traditional 4, and then we have 1 in between each of them.
Right.
So we have the brahmachari who's not quite married, the bachelor. Then the householder man who's not quite doing his duty as a householder, but he's traveling off and not being responsible.
Right.
Before his scripturally ordained time of
age 50 or
Panchodram Vanambra Jet. And we have the sannyasi who's not quite a sannyasi.
Right.
So each of the ashrams has to behave within the boundaries, within the perimeter of their prescribed behavior. That's what makes for good culture. But for people who say that it's too expensive, I say, how expensive can it be? You just need a place to feed people. You burn some sticks, you pour on some ghee, you throw in some seeds, there's some fruit. Expense should never be what we see in the big wedding.
Yeah, kurta for every 40 groomsmen or
40 groomsmen, everybody tailored to perfection. That wedding we call the baniya wedding.
Yeah,
it's a businessman's wedding. In other words, it's an upper middle class wedding in which thousands of dollars are spent, and for that. Then the couple say, well, that's the sort of wedding that we want because that's how we do it properly.
Yeah.
But we have to live together for the next 3 years in order to save up to get married 3 years from now.
Yeah.
No. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Have a simple wedding, burn some wood, but get the blessings of the Vaishnavas in the beginning. And then your 3 years you can save up for whatever you want to save up.
I think that's important that someone like you speaks like this, because nowadays everyone's kind of real sensitive to tread carefully and not offend anyone or not say something that might be like poking at someone's kind of insecurities or something.
Well, we need both. Prabhupada, one time Srila Prabhupada was asked, what does it mean to be a spiritual teacher? And he gave the example of the potwala in Vrindavan. He's making a pot, a lota, out of a sheet of metal. And he's making it with a hammer. And he's tap, 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 tap. Prabhupada said just little taps can make a sheet of metal become a pot. And he gestured with the pot. He said, but also, the man is taking his fist and he's putting the fist inside. So no fist, you won't get a pot. No tapping with a hammer, you won't get a pot. Both are required. So I think we have to be very, very sensitive to everyone's personal situation, because these are difficult times, especially in the ashram change.
Yes.
Especially personal circumstances. We have to be very, very sensitive to the person's needs.
Right.
However, at the same time, there's also a place in spiritual life for confrontational teaching.
Yes.
And sometimes people are very, it's like if a person has a dislocated arm, maybe he's played American football, he has a dislocated arm. There's no nice way you can set a dislocated arm. It's going to be painful.
Yeah.
The doctor has to say, okay, this is going to hurt.
Right.
And then he hurts you. But he did warn you, so you knew what was coming. So in the same way, a teacher may be very, very delicate, but in the same way as a doctor sometimes hurts in order to save and help in the long term. So the teacher may also speak in such a way to be strong. So you've asked the questions, and I'm saying this, I'm not directing it to any particular people to people that I know. Right. But it's just my general response to your question is that we have to preserve our culture, we have to protect it. Now, there are some things that are worth protecting, and I think Sanatan culture, our Dharma, is worth protecting. And if you look at our Shastras, you will find that these are the way that you do things. And it's worth looking at them occasionally to know what it is that you have bought into. You haven't just bought into adding a bead bag for an hour a day in your house and then the rest of the time you lead the life of your choosing. But Vedic culture, Vaishnava culture, has something to say about how you eat, where you eat, who you eat with, what time of the morning you get up, how you lead your life, what occupation you choose, who you marry, how you conceive children. There is something that is guidance there.
Yes.
For all those things, and it's all leading us upwards from ignorance to passion to goodness, the three qualities of nature, which we're trying to. The first two we're trying to, to elevate ourselves beyond. So we can help ourselves a lot more than we are by just taking guidance.
Definitely. That's brilliant advice. Let's go to our quick fire round. We're coming over to the end now. I mean, I could talk to you all day. This is really, really brilliant stuff. If you were on an island and you could only bring 3 things, what things would you bring?
Oh, picture of Panchatattva, Bhagavad Gita, and a bead bag.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell us.
Oh. If you had $1 million, I'm not going to say $1 million. What would you use it for? First of all, if it was, I don't know, like first for society or for yourself, you could answer in both ways.
Good question.
If I had $1 million, there are people in my country, in the UK, who have been very dedicatedly following the path of Krishna consciousness, and it would mean so much to them if they had a place where they could congregate. So I can think $1 million would go quite a way towards providing them with spaces in which kirtan could be done.
Wonderful.
Just a spaces for kirtan. At least 4. I think $1 million could get me at least 4.
Your top 3 pet peeves.
Top 3 pet peeves?
Yeah.
About?
Just in general.
Pet peeves are postmodernism, being a raft of political ideas which is tending towards a way of life which is set about unraveling a lot of the culture that we have developed, a lot of the good things that have developed both in the United States and in Western Europe. I would say misunderstandings about our cultural patterns within our Krishna consciousness movement. And I would say just my pet peeve is that we all live too short. Too short a life. And that at my age, at 62, that really bothers me.
Yes.
Because there's so much that I would like to do.
Yes.
I may not get the chance to do it or see the results of it.
Right.
So that really peeves me.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Dad. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Yes, a brilliant interview. If someone wants to get in contact with you, how can they do that the best?
Well, best is KM Dasa.
KMDASA.
DASA at Gmail.
At gmail.com.
And or they can watch me on Mayapur TV every Monday evening at UK time 7:30.
Okay, Mayapur.tv.
Yeah.
You do your own sort of a podcast type thing.
It's a broadcast. It's
a broadcast.
There's 15-20 minutes of philosophy to begin with, to warm everyone up.
Brilliant.
And then there's a chat box. You can put your own question, and you can come in, and I'll answer the questions live.
Every Monday, 7:30 UK time.
London time,
7:30 p.m. every Monday, Mayapur.tv.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. This book you can get on Amazon, I believe. The Guru and Disciple book by Kripamoya Das. And, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Haribol.
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 Haribol.